Okay, I should be able to get this one done. Hopefully I can finish, or at least get close to finishing this one. So it should be part 5, I think. Wow. The Source of Strife. Sylvester and Cardstead, exhibiting truly praiseworthy reaction times, shut the door and laid behind my shield of wind. In the blink of an eye, I poured as much mana as I could into the shield to strengthen it. I had to protect everyone inside no matter what. The beams of mana that the High Priest and Bindewald had shot from their wands mashed together so hard that they began to surge around each other, around her excess energy whipping around, but there was an obvious difference in the size and power of their mana, and in no time at all, the High Priest's mana overwhelmed Bindewald, pushing his beam back until it hit him and sent him flying. He smashed hard against the wall before falling to the ground and with a thud. He was covered in burns just like Dad was, and rolled on the ground letting out pain groans that made him sound even more like a toad. The High Bishop had survived thanks to the bands of light wrapped around him, but he was completely frozen, his eyes wide open. It must have been terrifying to see the huge beams of mana colliding right in front of him. The Grey Shrine Maiden's head collapsed. Devouring soldiers, however, were nowhere to be seen. They had no means of protecting themselves from the explosions of mana that had ceased erased from them Oh, good God. That means that the 2 Grey Shrine Maidens that had tried to enter and were blown back, and the Devouring soldiers are dead! Wow! That had erased them from existence. Mind, this is how you destroy evidence. Be thorough if you're going to do it. None of these people are supposed to be in here in the first place, the High Priest said as he looked down at the toad with cold eyes and thrust his wand without mercy. Bindewald squealed and crawled away as fast as he could, but the High Priest caught up in just a few steps. His lack of mercy was much appreciated when he was a friend, but I would never ever want him as an enemy. The High Priest is kind of terrifying. Well, no dip, dude. Ferdinand, isn't that enough? Said Sylvester. And mind, get rid of the shield. We don't need it anymore. He wasn't wearing the blue robes of a priest, but rather a fancier outfit than one might expect a noble to wear. Wasn't he wearing this during the spring prayer? Or, when they're downtime, I mean. Or am I missing something? Let me know if he was in the comments, because this seems like he was wearing the same outfit that he was wearing at this point. Or am I wrong? He stepped forward, whipping his dark yellow cape behind him. I stopped pouring mana into the shield as instructed, letting it fade, and the High Priest made his wand disappear as well. Stand down, Ferdinand. Sylvester darted up his chin as he made the order. In response, the High Priest stepped back and knelt before Sylvester, arms crossed in front of his chest. My jaw dropped at the sight of the High Priest kneeling. All blue priests were equal in status within the temple, and it was taught that there was no need for them to kneel to each other here, but so the High Priest wouldn't be bowing before Sylvester like that if he was a blue priest, which means he's not! I thought Brother Sylvester was just a particularly high-status priest, but maybe was he making a fake all along? I think that this says a resounding yes. I knew from how close they had seemed over spring prayer that he and the High Priest went way back, but the High Priest had never done anything to express such a clear gap in status before. Were I to assume that I had been seen a more personal side to their relationship during spring prayer than this would be how they acted during official public business. In other words, not only was Sylvester not a blue priest, he was of a high enough status that someone with higher status than anyone in the Knight's Order would kneel before him. Am I about to be adopted by someone ridiculously important? Yes! Yes, you are. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. Sylvester was of a high enough status to suppress the High Bishop and make the High Priest kneel. To be fair, he had to be to save me and everyone else, but it was still coming out of left field for me. My heart pounded as I tried to process the situation. Sylvester, you've come at the perfect time. Do me a favor and order this insolent fool to undo these bindings, the High Bishop said while looking between him and the High Priest, still bound by the bands of light. They seemed to know each other, but all Sylvester did was glance at the kneeling High Priest in the kneeling High Priest's direction without ordering him to undo the bindings. I hurried back at the call of the Knight's Order, and this mess is what I find? What happened here? Who are you? Bindewald croaked out his head, shooting back and forth between Sylvester and the High Bishop. He wasn't keeping up with the situation at all. Cardstead took a step in front of Sylvester, and with his feet planted firmly and his head held high, glared down at Bindewald. You sit before Ob Ehrenfest himself. Yeah, the Archduke himself of Ehrenfest. Yeah, I didn't even realize this until I went and spoiled myself while we were going through the anime when Sylvester had been introduced. I was trying to figure out who the heck he was. I ended up spoiling myself on who he was. I was like, really? Why is my curiosity gotta get the better of me? What? Grindelwald pointed at Sylvester, shaking. That can't be. This is a lie, he repeated over and over. Personally, I had absolutely no idea why he was shaking like a frog staring down the open mouth of a snake. Ehrenfest, hello. Who else has the last name of the dang country? Or the duchy, or whatever you want to call it. As I tilted my head in confusion, I heard a rustling as Dad got up so that he could kneel as well. I scooted over and whispered, Dad, do you know who that is, in a quiet voice? There's only one person in the duchy that has the same name as the city. And that's the Archduke, he replied quietly, a grim look on his face. What? The adult-sized elementary schooler, Sylvester, is the Archduke. I wanted to scream, but clamped a hand over my mouth and swallowed my surprise. This guy poked the cheek of a girl he just met, made her say pooey, snatched away her hair stick, performed acrobatic stunts in front of farmers, went hunting in the lower city's forest without any yards, and he's the Archduke? A weirdo like him, the Archduke. What? Is this duchy going to be okay? He might act weird, but he has a good heart and he does know what he has to do. So I think the duchy will be fine. You dare continue to play the fool? Your rudeness will get you killed. That is not how one speaks to Ob Ehrenfest. Kneel now, barked Karstedt, interrupting my much more disrespectful thoughts. Yes, sir. I jumped in surprise as Karstedt yelled at Grindelwald, and I immediately knelt on the ground. Mine. What in the world are you doing over there? Karstedt called over in a voice tinged with both exasperation and confusion. I timidly lifted my head and saw that while everyone else was kneeling with their arms across their chest, only I was groveling with my forehead pressed against the floor. Everyone was looking at me like I was a weirdo, and it kind of hurt. You are a weirdo, dude. Well, you said to kneel, and it kind of just happened. Apparently, I had just made a fool of myself in the middle of something very important. I hurriedly fixed my posture and knelt properly, at which point Sylvester leisurely scanned the hallway. His expression was strict and deadly serious, unlike any I had seen him wear before. Had he been like this the first time I saw him, I wouldn't have been surprised at all to learn that he was the Archduke. Sylvester's gaze fell on the High Bishop, whereupon he narrowed his eyes. Now then, could you explain what happened here, Uncle? In a shocking twist, Sylvester and the High Bishop were relatives. Yeah, Sylvester's mother is the High Bishop's sister. That meant that if Sylvester adopted me, I would end up related to the High Bishop too. Oh, I can't imagine a worse fate. No, thank you. I don't need a great uncle like him. No, you do not. Ah, I knew you would listen, Sylvester. And so the High Bishop told his story, which was more than a little twisted in his favor. Count Grindelwald had been summoned here because of me. It ended up in a mess that brought Sylvester back here because of me. It was all my fault for not just letting myself get imprisoned. It was my fault he was suffering in the high priest bands of light, and all the problems in the temple were caused by a commoner like me being given blue robes. In the end, everything was apparently about 80% my fault, plus 20% the high priest's fault. We had supposedly used Sylvester's absence to trick him and lead him into a trap. To be honest, it was all so paper thin that I honestly had to question whether the High Bishop was just plain stupid or not. Like, I had been doing pretty much all the math in the temple's financial ledgers while helping the High Priest. I knew well that he wasn't trying to trap the High Bishop while Sylvester was away. That was just completely off base. The High Priest was much scarier than that. Count Grindelwald, are you of the same perspective? Sylvester asked, moving his eyes to Grindelwald and frowning with annoyance after the High Bishop started repeating himself. The burnt-up toad was pretty much on the same page as the High Bishop, blaming me, the commoner, for everything. Isn't it kind of unreasonable to blame these burns on me? I mean, come on. Now then, Ferdinand, please present your evidence and testimony, as you wish. The High Priest began to dryly list off everything that had happened after Grindelwald entered the city using a forged permit. He included a report on me being attacked in the lower city, seeking my father's perspective as a guard at the east gate where the problem had first occurred, which strengthened his testimony further. Judging by how much the High Priest knew, he must have been magically contacted in his room somehow, which was possible why he had left his hidden room in the first place. As I am not from this duchy, I had no way of knowing that the rules had changed, or that my permit was forged. I was invited and came, nothing more. Is that a crime? Yes. Considering you attacked the adoptive daughter of the Archduke. So, yeah. Grindelwald insisted the incident in the lower city had nothing to do with him, and that he was just another victim here. Ehrenfest, I had no idea that this document was forged. I thought for certain that you had signed it yourself, he said, with a forced smile while taking out a document from his coat pocket. Karstedt retrieved it and handed the document to Sylvester, who looked over it before giving a slight grin. I could see him going, hell yeah, evidence, get. On the evidence inside, which made me realize something. There were some other documents I wanted him to get from Grindelwald. Count Grindelwald tricked Dirk into a submission contract by claiming it was an adoption form. Would that document count as forged as well? This child is lying to you. I presented it as a submission contract from the very start. A noble such as myself would never adopt a commoner orphan. Bindewald replied on the spot, glaring at me and calling me a liar. Delia glared back at him with a fierce look in her eyes, Dirk still in her arms. The High Bishops and the Count said it was an adoption form, and there were 2 layers of parchment at the top to hide the actual title. Silence. Show us the document. With the second layer of parchment already removed, there was nothing suspicious about the submission contract at all. There was consequently nothing to hide, so Bindewald took it out and presented it to Karstad without a moment of hesitation. So, Ferdinand? I was shown an adoption contract. The High Priest glared at Bindewald as if frustrated that he would tell such an obvious lie. My testimony as a commoner and Delia's testimony as an apprentice Great Shrine Maiden meant nothing due to our lore status. But the High Priest was a noble, which meant that his testimony had weight. The fact that Sylvester had asked for his opinion showed how much trust he had in him. Bindewald paled, having disrespected the High Priest after thinking he was just another blue priest. Surely you just misread. Plus, we are talking about an orphan with the devouring here. In this case, there is not much difference between us, an adoption form, and a submission contract. Am I wrong? He was wrong, but apparently he wanted to pretend he wasn't. Bindewald's eyes flitted across the room. He had sensed things weren't in his favor and was looking for a way out, which in his mind he found when he saw me. His eyes widened in realization, and he pointed at me, changing the topic out of nowhere. More importantly, I asked that you punish that commoner. Commoner? Sylvester replied, an eyebrow raised. The fact he had replied at all must have made Bindewald think he had a chance, so he began ranting about me spit shooting out of his mouth. I have heard of this mine girl as a commoner who was only given blue robes due to your magnanimity, and yet she arrogantly behaves as she is at the top of the world. She fired her mana at me, a noble, and killed my personal guards who only fought to protect me. She is a dangerous and violent commoner. I can hardly imagine what vile corruption rots her mind. His speech was so ridiculous that I couldn't help but blink in surprise. What the heck is this toad saying? Does he have actual brain damage or something? It wouldn't surprise me. You're the one who ordered your soldiers to kidnap me. Do you not even remember what you did just a moment ago? Do not argue with a noble commoner. Bindewald barked, glaring at me furiously, but Sylvester just grinned. Count Bindewald, let me clear up a misunderstanding real fast. That girl you keep calling a commoner is my adoptive daughter. She's what? A commoner adopted by an archduke? Sylvester, ignoring Bindewald's stunned expression, gestured me over. We've already finished the adoption contract. Mine, come here. I walked over to him and Sylvester pulled at the chain around my neck, exposing the necklace with the black stone. And here's proof of that. This girl is your adopted daughter? Yep. And if she were a commoner, you'd be in the right here. The law would work in your favor, but mine is already my adopted daughter. Know what that means? Your crime isn't just illegally entering the capital city of another duchy. It's attacking a member of the archducal family. Her guards are seriously injured, and she's saying that you attacked her with mana. Sylvester gave a dismissive snort, then lurked my way. Tell me what the Count did to you. He didn't just attack me with mana. I was ambushed in the lower city, and he tried to force a submission contract on me. That's when he cut me with the knife. I explained as I spread my palms, showing the wound that had finally stopped bleeding. I listed everything I could remember while watching the toad pale with horror. The men that attacked us during Spring Prayer were also devouring soldiers forced into submission contracts with him. He was whining about the points he lost when trying to attack me, both now and in the spring. My testimony as a commoner might not have meant anything, but being the daughter of the Archduke changed that, whether I was adopted or not. Not to mention that Sylvester had accompanied us during Spring Prayer. Count Bindewald was surely unaware of the fact, but his party had attacked the Archduke directly. Ha ha. Fascinating. Sounds like he's got a lot of crimes to his name. Count Bindewald, you're under arrest. Your crimes are illegally entering my city and attacking my daughter alongside her knight bodyguard. Sylvester said in a firm tone that left no room for argument. As for the mysterious attack on the carriages during Spring Prayer, I was there with them. It will be taken as a declaration of war from your duchy's archduke. You are a criminal who has greatly disturbed interduchy politics. You will be interrogated. I will question Ab Ehrenbach on whether he does intend to declare war, and then your fate will be decided. Get him. Karstad made his wand appear and brought it down in a sharp slash which sent bands of light just like the ones wrapped around the High Bishop, flying out of his tip. Bindewald, his eyes rolled back in his head from foam bubbling in his mouth, was captured without any resistance. I think he kind of made himself go unconscious with the realization of what he had done. Karstad then strode to the door leading to the Noble's Gate, threw it open, and shot a beam of light up into the sky. The Noble's Gate opened, and the Knight's Order, having apparently been waiting behind it, marched into the temple to retrieve Bindewald and the unconscious Daniel. That was when Sylvester, who had been watching them out of the corner of his eye, shifted his gaze to the High Bishop. Sylvester, we do not even know what woman gave birth to Ferdinand. There is no need for you to pay any mind to the likes of him. And how were you ever fooled into adopting a despicable commoner like mine? I cannot believe a child like her has corrupted the heart of our duchy's archduke. Please cancel the adoption right away, the High Bishop said haughtily from the ground, still wrapped in bands of light. This is my sincerest warning to you as your uncle, and you would do well to listen. Nope. Nope, with all you done. I could tell from Karstadt's and Ferdinand's exasperated expressions that this wasn't the first time he had used that line. Ferdinand may have been born from a different mother, but he's still my little brother. Haha. He is skilled and his work is true. I will not have you scorn him. You cannot trust a half-blood relative. My older sister, your circumstances are your own. We are different. The high priest of the Archduke's half-brother and the son of the last Archduke? Okay, that explains why the Knights Order would kneel to him. Yeah. His past caught me by surprise. I can imagine that the High Bishop and Sylvester's mother were always trying to get in the way of their friendship. Maybe the High Priest had joined the temple due to something like that? That might be part of it. You are my beloved nephew, Sylvester, the precious son of my older sister. I did not want you to suffer any misfortune. Please listen to my warning, the High Bishop pleaded like a desperate older man. Sylvester looked down at him with cold eyes. I am Ab Ehrenfest, and I will not repeat the same mistake forever. As Archduke, I will abandon my familial sympathy and have you punished in accordance with the law. What? Veronica will never accept this. Well, too bad. Yes, you have to. Apparently, whenever the High Bishop broke any laws, Sylvester's mother would get involved and smooth over the situation for her little brother. I had been wondering why he was so arrogant and aggressive, but now I understood. He really could do whatever he wanted when he had the Archduke's mother compensating for his lack of status. Uncle, you went too far this time. Mother can no longer protect you. She, too, will be charged with forging documents and assisting in criminal acts. It looked like Sylvester would be charging his own mother in order to punish the High Bishop. I could guess that in the past, his mother had only ever protected the High Bishop, never going as far as to commit crimes that could be traced back to her. But this time she had disobeyed the orders of the Archduke and forged documents to allow an outsider into the city, a clear-cut crime regardless of whether or not the Archduke was her son. Sylvester no doubt intended to punish both his mother and his uncle in one fell swoop. Sylvester, you intend to turn your own mother into a criminal? You will not escape from such a horrible act unharmed. And that is your fault, Sylvester barked after the High Bishop yelled in protest. You have committed so many crimes that I can no longer even count them. Mother protected you out of love each time, and now it has come to this. You will be executed for your countless crimes, and Mother will be imprisoned. You are not needed in my politics, he concluded flatly. The spark faded from the High Bishop's eyes, and he looked at Sylvester with an ashen expression like a fire had been burnt out. But Archdukes did not go back on their word. Take the High Bishop and his attendants away. Yes, sir. It seemed that just like how any crimes I committed would bring punishment to my family and attendants, any crimes that the High Bishop committed would bring punishment to his attendants. The knights called by Karstad first picked up the restrained High Bishop, then went to his room to get his attendants. The shrine maidens by the door were captured as well, with one of them being Delia, who raised her head and looked desperately around for help. Her eyes met for just a second. She lowered her gaze with a defeated smile, then held out Dirk. Sister mine, please take care of Dirk. Her furrowed brow, lowered lip, eyes, and trembling frown felt all too familiar. She looked the same way when she told me she wished I had saved her as well back when I started reconstructing the orphanage. A sharp stab of pain pierced my heart. I had made her a promise back then. I had told her that I'd be there for her the next time she was in trouble, that I would save her when she needed it. I nodded to myself, then lifted my head. Lord Sylvester, I have a request. Let's hear it. May I ask you not to execute Delia? Why? Sylvester asked, his deep green eyes already gleaming with interest. Delia was simply tricked by Count Bindewald and the High Bishop. It is true that she made a lot of mistakes here, but she wasn't acting maliciously. Not to mention she was only the High Bishop's attendant for a brief time. And given her very young age, I don't think she was involved in his illegal activities or flower offering at all. True, but she was here and involved in the heart of this conflict, so she can't escape punishment. As the Archduke's daughter, show me how you would judge her. His gaze made it clear that she would be executed as normal if he wasn't satisfied with my response, and I swallowed hard at the strictness hidden within the amusement in his eyes. Delia will return to the orphanage that she swore never to visit again if she could help it. That's all. And she will not be allowed to become anyone's attendant, as the only escape from the orphanage is being taken as someone's attendant. This means she will remain there for the rest of her life, forced to stay in the orphanage she hated so much for however many years to come. I believe that is more than enough punishment for her. Sylvester glanced at Delia, saw the blood draining from her face, and gave a small nod. Seems like that would be a good punishment for her. Sure, consider it done. I thank you, Delia. You will now live in the orphanage. Your job will be to look after the orphans that are brought to us, starting with Dirk. Understood. Delia squeezed Dirk in a hug, and her stiff expression softened just a bit. The new me. Oh, boy. Yeah, this last bit is probably going to make me cry. Especially when we get to where we find out about Fran's past. Because that is included in one of the side stories in this book. The new me. The knights bustled about, tying up the high bishop and his attendants to take them away. I asked whether there was anything I could do to help, then saw Dirk still limp in Delia's arms. I am worried about Dirk. If possible, I would like to go to the orphanage with Delia to inform Wilma of the circumstances. That's not important. Let someone else handle it, Sylvester replied, his arms crossed and feet firmly planted as he looked down at me. The most important thing here is figuring out what's going to happen with you, and we haven't even started on that. Ferdinand, lend me your room. As you wish. Please give me a moment to prepare. The high priest smoothly turned around and returned to his room, preparing to welcome Sylvester, the Archduke. Delia hugged Dirk. Thank you, sister mine. I will be fine on my own. Goodbye, she whispered before starting to walk to the orphanage. I watched her go. Are you mine's father? Yes, sir. My name is Gunther. I turned around to see Dad kneeling before Sylvester, who was looking at him with an expression blank enough that I couldn't tell what he was thinking at all. Call your family. You're all we need to finish up the adoption papers, but I'll give you all an opportunity to say your goodbyes. That is appreciated, Dad said as he stood up, his legs wobbly and fists tightly clenched. He, too, wore a blank expression, his low status preventing him from showing the storm of emotions raging within. Gunther, one moment. I will have someone show you to the gate, Fran said as he stood up as well. He winced in pain, then instructed a nearby Grey Priest to guide Dad to the gate. He didn't forget to instruct someone to wait at the gate as well, since Dad would be coming back with the family soon. Alright, looks like Ferdinand's all done. Let's go mine. Sylvester started walking as soon as he saw one of the high priest's attendants come out to summon us. Kartstedt followed a step behind, having just finished giving instructions to the Knight's Order. When I started going as well, Fran took a wavy step forward to accompany me. Fran, you can go back to my chambers and rest if you're in too much pain. No, I am your head attendant, sister mine. I cannot allow my mistress to face an important discussion like this alone, he said. There was nothing I could do about the firm resolve in his eyes. I permitted him to follow, and he walked on while doing his best to stop the pain from showing on his face. Once in the high priest's room, I was guided to the table which had already been prepared for visitors. I sat down on the seat offered to me, but Sylvester and Kartstedt went over to the high priest's desk to discuss something. I am glad to see you well after all that, sister mine, Arnold said gently as he pushed a serving cart carrying a tea set over to me. Fran moved to help as usual, but let out a grunt of pain after trying to extend his arm. Perhaps you should return to your room, Fran. You seem to be in great pain, and she has other attendants who can be here, Arnold murmured in a rebuking tone. I wasn't supposed to get involved with conversations between attendants. But I was worried about Fran's wounds too, and wanted to throw my full support behind Arnold's suggestion. Oh, if you knew how Arnold treated Fran, you wouldn't. No, I must stay. I already asked Sister Mine to allow me to accompany her here. You really do lack flexibility, Fran. That's right, Arnold. Keep giving it to... No. Girl, I first thought Arnold was a good guy too, but after hearing about what happened in Fran's past between him and Arnold and all that, Arnold's a piece of crap. I internally cheered Arnold on. I had let Fran join me since he was always so diligent and dedicated to his work, but would really rather he had gone back to his room to rest. I do not want to hear that from you, Arnold. You could have told us that the high priest was in his hidden room instead of sticking to the story of him being absent. Some flexibility there would have been much appreciated, Fran complained, his frustration clear in his voice. He was right, really. Arnold was at times more inflexible than he probably should have been. Maybe that was just because he was the high priest's attendant and they all ended up like that? I gave a small smile. A tea is all we need. Leave. The high priest cleared the room, sending all of our attendants outside. The only ones left were me, the high priest, Sylvester, and Kartstedt. My family will be joining us eventually, but for now it was just us key members. Sylvester's Archduke persona dropped as soon as the attendants were gone. He slumped over in exhaustion and hung his head. Sheesh, I'm beat. I never want to put any of my family on trial again. Things will get a lot easier for us after this. For now, just remember it's not over yet. Keep your back straight, Carson said, giving the slumped Sylvester a slap on the back. Sylvester bent his lips into a frown and sent a glare in my direction. Kartstedt, think about it. What's the point in acting big in front of mine at this point? She understands me already. If you're going to be her adoptive father, you've got to at least stay sharp at the beginning, Kartstedt chastised. He honestly seemed like he would be a much more reliable adoptive father than Sylvester, so I thought for the 1000th time while watching them back and forth. If the High Bishop is your uncle, and the High Priest you've been so friendly with is your half-brother from another mother, Is it safe to say you are related to Lord Karstead by blood too? I replied. Lord Karstead was close enough to Sylvester to hit him, the Archduke, on the head, alongside the High Priest. It was more likely than not that he was a blood relative too. Yeah, Karsted's my cousin, the son of my dad's older brother. Older brother? Wait, then how is succession determined here? Apparently it wasn't determined by age. Maybe the youngest son took over? As I blinked in surprise, Sylvester looked at me with a baffled expression. What else would it be determined by if not mana? The most important thing for someone ruling a duchy is having enough mana to keep it afloat. So successors are generally chosen from the first wife's kids, especially since she'll have a lot of political influence through her side of the family. I see. Even ruling duchies require mana. I forgot, since you talk to us like it's nothing, but you really don't know anything about this place, huh? Nope. What was common sense for nobles wasn't even known by adults born and raised in the lower city, so it would be pretty unreasonable to expect me to know these things. I pouted, and Sylvester hardened his expression while still slumped over. Mine, let's be a little serious for a second, okay? The adoption was more or less completed when you stamped your blood against the contract necklace I gave you. But we're going to need to pull some tricks to make sure this actually works. Apparently, they were first going to pass me off as Karsted's daughter, and then have Sylvester adopt me. It was like money laundering, but for identity. Is there any significance to me becoming Karsted's daughter? Absolutely. Can't you tell there's a big difference between a commoner being adopted by the Archduke and the daughter of an archnoble descended from a former Archduke being adopted by the Archduke? That's true, but what's the point when so many from the Knights Order already know I'm a commoner? They would be able to draw a connection between the blue-robed commoner Shrine Maiden and the Archduke's adopted daughter the second they saw me. Surely they would question where all this business about me being Karsted's daughter came from. That's just the Knights Order. Karstead and Ferdinand can take care of that. The story is going to be that you're Karsted's beloved daughter. The story? I don't see any way this isn't going to be seen through right away. Am I the crazy one here? There had been about 20 knights who had seen me during the Trombe extermination. It was far too late to start saying I was Karsted's daughter, if you ask me. Nah, it's surprisingly easy to mess with people's memories. Karstead doted on his now-dead third wife. And you're her daughter, Sylvester said flatly with a shake of his head. The daughter of his third wife? You're right. Karsted's third wife was of humble med-noble origin, but she had a wealth of mana. That led to his first two archnoble wives picking on her relentlessly. Wow, this made-up story is starting to sound like a soap opera. How seriously should I be taking this? I mean, you don't know if it's actually true or not. It could be true. They just have to meddle a little bit at the end. She died not long after giving birth to you, and in order to save you from the same fate as your mother, Karstead had you raised out of sight in the temple. He hid your origin for safety's sake, and my uncle misunderstood that to mean you're a commoner. He tricked countless people with his complaining, and due to his lies, an innocent knight even ended up executed. My uncle's crimes know no bounds. Innocent knight ended up being executed. Are you talking about Shikikozu? I guess that's the story they're sticking with. The High Bishop's list of crimes keeps getting longer with things he didn't do. My jaw dropped at Sylvester's bare-faced audacity, and after a second of blinking in surprise, I looked at Karstead and the High Priest. They both looked exasperated. But Lord Karstead and I made it clear that this was our first meeting back during the Trombe incident. Of course the commander of the Knights Order is going to keep his private and public life separate. No commander would get all friendly with his secret daughter during a mission. We just have to say he was doing his job properly. Sylvester seemed intent on sticking to that story, but it seemed hard to believe that anyone would buy something like that. It just didn't add up, and since I couldn't believe Sylvester, I turned to the High Priest for reassurance. Would a half-baked story like that hold water in noble society? Mind, you may not remember this, but Christine was in the temple for fairly similar reasons. The High Priest's cold words brought the memories flooding back. My main impression of Christine was that she was an artistic shrine maiden and the former mistress of Wilma and Rosina. But I did seem to remember something about her being a noble's daughter who was raised in the temple because her father's first wife disliked her. He had sent her money and tutored so that she could be welcomed back into noble society when it was safer for her. Well, a living example does make the story seem more believable. It does not bother me. Many times before I have wished that I had a daughter with Rosemary before she passed. As it turned out, he actually did have a third wife who had apparently died after being bullied by his other wives. Am I going to get bullied the second I become a noble? Well, if you're fine with that, Lord Karstead, I am as well, but wouldn't it be weird to introduce a child so long after their birth? Don't people celebrate children when they're born? When Kami was born, the first thing we did was throw a party and show him to everyone we could. I told this to so many people as possible would remember when he was born, since this world didn't have birth records, but maybe nobles were different? Karstead was the one who replied to my question. He put a hand on his chin and narrowed his eyes a bit, as if thinking things over from as many perspectives as possible. We celebrate the births of children from the first wives, but it is common not to bother informing others of births among second and third wives. In noble society, it is only at their baptism that children are introduced as members of the family. Few know just how many children anyone else has unless they are particularly close. Oh, I see. I nodded to myself, at which point the high priest continued with a thin smile. Reason being, children that lack the mana befitting their family are adopted by lesser families before their baptism, or sent to the temple. The higher a noble is ranked, the less reason there is for them to announce a birth before they are sure the child has enough mana for them. Holy cow! Noble society is actually terrifying. It seemed to be built entirely around having mana, and my upbringing in the lower city would be entirely relevant there. There was a lot of culture shock just from joining the temple, but I could already tell joining noble society would be far worse. So yeah, Sylvester added, if you want to raise your kid as a noble, the latest you can wait to reveal them is their baptism. Karstead will use your baptism to announce that you were born with an extraordinary amount of mana just like your mother, and that I'm adopting you. That way, he could give his beloved daughter the status she deserves, while protecting her from his wives, and that's the story. Got all that? I nodded, thinking over everything he had just told me. So noble society really is just like a soap opera. Can I turn this story into a book? You can include it in your autobiography if you ever write one. No, I think I'll pass, thank you. I'm just a very weak little girl who likes to read books. I'll never write an autobiography. I rejected the idea immediately, earning me a grin from Sylvester and a comment that since he had gone out of his way to think up the story, we might as well spread it across the world. Yeah. Anyway, point being, we'll hold your baptism ceremony this summer. It'll happen in Karsted's mansion, and we'll announce your adoption to me at the same time. Karstead, when's a good time for you? How does right before the Starbind ceremony sound? We'll need time to prepare for the baptism. Outfits, food, invitations, and the like, Karstead said. The high priest fell into thought, then shook his head. I believe it would be better to plan the ceremony for a few days earlier, rather than right before the Starbind ceremony. Considering Mayan's poor health, we can never be sure when she might end up bedridden. We'll need extra time to keep an eye on her. I see. We'll need a time buffer in case she gets sick. Preparing early will make things difficult, Karstead said with a troubled frown. Karstead, invite as many people as you can to the baptism ceremony. Given that we'll be announcing the adoption at the same time, the more people who are in attendance, the better. Ah, that reminds me. You will do well to assign her an etiquette tutor before the baptism, Karstead. She knows the fundamentals thanks to the instruction of her attendants, but she has never had a proper teacher. The three of them were ignoring me, steadily advancing their plans while I sat there stunned. But I already had my baptism ceremony a whole year ago. Won't this mean we'll be lying about my age? Baptisms were held at age 7, and mine had happened a full year ago. I don't want to have another and go back to being 7 years old. That feels like being held back a year in school. I pursed my lips in a pout, and Sylvester glared at me with his deep green eyes. Don't whine about a single year's difference. This is to ensure you fit right into noble society, and considering how young you look, we could honestly even get away with pushing the baptism ceremony back an entire year, no problem. An entire year? Now you're just being mean. I am getting bigger, you know. Since it was essential for me being accepted into noble society, going back to the age of 7 was already set in stone. They ignored my frustration and continued the discussion. Anyway, about your life after the baptism. You will be participating in noble affairs, such as the daughter of the Archduke. Me. And if nothing's going on, you'll be spending your time in the temple just like Ferdinand, really. What? That sounded like such a busy lifestyle that I actually felt my face twitch in fear. With all of our mana problems, it'll be putting too much large of a burden on Ferdinand to take you completely out of the temple. Not to mention your workshop. The plan is for us to take on your book production as official duchy business. But it'll be people in the lower city who actually make the books. It'll be easier for me to make things happen if you keep your existing connections in the lower city. I've already talked this over with the Gilberta Company. Sylvester said with a sly grin of someone who had a ton of irons in the fire. When did that happen? I thought. Then remembered Benno being dragged away by Sylvester during his workshop tour, and how thoroughly worn out he had looked after. Good luck, Benno, you have my support. So in short, after my second baptism, I'll be playing 3 roles at once. I'll be the Archduke's daughter, a blue apprentice shrine maiden, and a forewoman. That'll be exhausting, I said, while counting my rolls on my fingers. Sylvester shook his head. Not quite. You won't be an apprentice shrine maiden anymore. You'll be the high bishop. What? I said, tilting my head at Sylvester. I had probably just misheard him. I had definitely just misheard him. Silly me, I need to work on my hearing. As I attempted to avoid reality, Sylvester let out a sigh. Nobody's going to want to succeed a high bishop who abused his power and ended up getting executed. Everything they do will be under scrutiny, meaning no room for any legally questionable behavior. It's a job with nothing to make it worthwhile. On top of that, it comes with the Archduke's daughter and half-brother, who would take up the job knowing it'd wear on their sanity more by the day. But in that case, shouldn't the High Priest be the High Bishop? He's much better suited for the job than I am, I said, shooting a glance toward him, but Sylvester just gave an exasperated shrug. From an outside perspective, it doesn't really matter which one of you takes the job, but the actual work that's expected of you both is entirely different. Ferdinand is at his best, doing the nitty-gritty work and holding all the priests together. You will never last as a high priestess mine. It was true that the high priest's duties covered a lot of ground. If he asked me whether I could do his job, but the answer would be a firm no. But the high bishop was the highest authority in the temple. Those were shoes too big for me to fill. I can't be the high bishop. I'm a kid who only had her baptism last year. My failure of an uncle managed it. You'll be fine. All you have to do is sit around and let things happen. Honestly, considering that all my uncle ever did was break the law, you'll be a better high bishop than him just by doing nothing at all. Sure is nice to be following up a failure, Sylvester said, but I didn't think that was their problem. As I floundered about nervously, the high priest tapped his temple and began to speak. It certainly will be a great deal easier to work without that oath getting in my way. That alone is enough for me to welcome mine as high bishop. I myself will be handling the majority of the difficult work, but mine is always more than willing to help when asked. I would much rather have her here than a certain someone who pushes all of his work onto others and then vanishes, he said, all the while glaring directly at that certain someone. Sylvester snorted and said he could feel free to keep working me to the bone like he had been already. I ignored Sylvester's rude comment and decided to just thank the high priest for his kind praise. Mine, you really think you should be treating me like that? I was going to let you keep using director's chambers as thanks for taking on the job. And I was going to turn a blind eye to you sometimes meeting commoners there, but I'm not so sure now. Lord Sylvester, I love you. I curled my fingers into a hard front of my chest, eyes shining. Karstead poked Sylvester on the side of the head. He's making it seem like he's doing you a favor, but don't be fooled. He's just planning to turn the temple into his base so he can wander around the lower city. Huh? Karstead, you make it sound so much worse than it actually is. I'm adopting my cousin's beloved daughter. Why wouldn't I want to come visit her? Sylvester asked with a serious expression, but no, on significantly closer inspection, it was written all over his face that he just wanted to go hunting again. No doubt his plan here was just to make it easier for him to go and play around in the lower city. Sylvester, you're going to let mine deal with commoners? I would think that's too dangerous, considering she'll be Karsted's daughter, the high priest commented warily. If we're going to grow bookmaking as a government business, we'll need connections with the Gilberta Company. Do you know how much work it would be to crush that store and build up a new one from scratch? Sylvester replied casually. You're going to crush the Gilberta Company? Don't jump to conclusions. I'm not planning on doing anything to them. Their owner is quick on the uptake, and he knows how to keep a secret. Shockingly few people know who you really are, mine, and most of those who do are Gilberta Company employees. Everyone else thinks you're either Benno's daughter or some rich girl, so there won't be any problem with us saying you were a noble all along. Although the books would be produced under the authority of the Archduke, it would be my Gutenbergs who actually make them, with me at their center. As such, it was more convenient to keep a place that commoners were able to enter freely than to constantly have to summon them all to Noble's Quarter. Oh, now I'm almost at 200. Good God! You can meet commoners in their chambers just like you have been, Sylvester said, and my face lit up. But you will not be allowed to meet your family as family. You will become Karsted's daughter and my adopted daughter. It's important that you leave your old family so that you might join ours. If you can't do that, I can't allow you to meet your family ever again. My face darkened again. It was like a chill had been sent through my heart. I wasn't sure whether I should be happy that I was allowed to see them at all, or fearful that doing so would just make it hurt all the worse. There won't be a problem with your soldier father accompanying you as a guard while you travel, or having your older sister get involved with making paper. Work relationships are fine. But I will have you swear through a magic contract that you will no longer call each other family, Sylvester said. He looked at me with hard eyes, and I could feel my heart thumping painfully in my chest. Guys, here we go. If you are to be ripped apart, if you are to be baptized as Karsted's child, you will need a new name, the high priest prompted, breaking the silence that had fallen over the room. I blinked in confusion, not following his logic. A new name? Yeah, your current name doesn't sound too great, Sylvester agreed. Apparently nobles needed to have long names, not short ones, which meant that all of the nobles I would soon be meeting against my will would have long names. Honestly, I had no faith that I would be able to remember them all. But I remembered all those long god names, so maybe I'll be fine. At least, I hope so. I hope I will be. Ideally, it'll be something that can be shortened to mine as a nickname. That will help explain anyone from the Gilberta Company using her old name by accident. Mine, any preferences here? Sylvester asked. I was trying to think of a new name that incorporated mine, but sadly nothing immediately sprung to mind. All I could think of are terrible names like Minigo, Eratamine, and Akaimine. Those all sound quite strange. I imagine they each have some particular meaning to you, the high priest asked with a confused frown. As he expected, I was using the Japanese from my Arano days, so nobody understood what I was trying to say. They mean mine too, new mine, and red mine, respectfully. Why is red mine one of your suggestions? Your color would be blue based on your birth, midnight blue based on your hair, or gold based on your eyes. Where are you getting red from? I don't really understand this myself, but red versions of people tend to be like stronger or faster. Sylvester gave me a weird look, but I was basing that off of something my childhood friend from my Arano days had told me. So I didn't really have a strong grasp on the concept myself. My mom was completely sold on the red underwear is lucky boom of her day, so that was probably one of the reasons I subconsciously associated the color with strength. Incidentally, the red underwear was supposedly good to wear when the stakes were high. My mom had given me a pair for my college admissions exam, but I was too embarrassed by her motherly love to actually wear them. I luckily passed the exam anyway, and while that made my mom's faith in red underwear grow even deeper, I had actually been wearing light blue underwear at the time. I'm sorry I was such a bad daughter. As my thoughts wandered, Sylvester's eyes shot open in shock at my statement. Hold on a second. I'm the one who's confused here. Red is a strong color? If we're talking about strength, what else is there but blue, the defined color of Leidenschaft? Karstedt rested a hand on his forehead, and his face seemed to cloud over a little. Red is the divine color of Geduld, the goddess of earth. It represents warmth and compassion, which is feminine, but not exactly what you seem to have been going for. Yeah, okay, I guess that's what happens when you have two different cultures that have developed independently. My goal had been to envision a new me, stronger and healthier than ever before, but that didn't get through to anybody. The high priest glared at me, tapping a finger against his temple. You should know that strength and speed are ill-fitting for a woman's name. Your lack of common sense astounds once again. Need I remind you that this is the name you will be using for the rest of your life. Think harder, fool. I'm sorry, but honestly I don't really know what kind of names nobles usually have, or in what manner they're given, so I'm kind of at a loss here. When coming up with names in Japan, we would sometimes borrow parts of a parent's name, have the local temple decide, or have the name of some personal family tradition. I had no idea how names were decided here, and when I asked for details, Sylvester Karstedt and the high priest all seemed thrown off. Some people take names from their ancestors or great people of history, but there aren't really any rules beyond that. Sylvester explained. I nodded, intrigued, as Karstedt rubbed his chin in thought, then raised his head to look at me. If we were to borrow from the name of one of your parents, what if we took inspiration from the rose in Rosemary and named you Rosemine? Wow, now that sounds like a noble girl's name. I like it a lot. It's much cuter and more feminine than anything I could have ever come up with. It seems that you will need to work on developing a better sense of aesthetic, mine, the high priest said with a quiet laugh before standing up. It seemed he would be writing up both the magic contract to change my name and the previously discussed contract before my parents arrived. Not long after he finished, we heard the tinkling of a small bell outside. You may enter, the high priest permitted, and an attendant who had been waiting outside opened the door. Fran guided the visitors inside as Arno announced their arrival with long, noble phrases. Tuli was holding hands with Dad, and Mom was carrying Camille in a sling. Mine! Tuli let go of Dad's hand and raced toward me, positively beaming as she jumped into my arms. Tuli, I hugged her back, and after a tight squeeze, she let go of me and started to make sure I wasn't hurt anywhere. Dad was super hurt and came to get us with a scary look on his face. He even said, Mom has to bring Camille to the temple, so I was really scared something had happened to you, mine. I'm so glad you're safe. Tuli, in all her innocence, was just glad to see that I was safe, but Mom understood the situation as soon as she saw the high priest and the other nobles in the room. She shut her eyes in anguish as she knelt down, Camille in her arms. Tuli, there are nobles here. You need to kneel, Dad said, plopping a firm hand on Tuli's shoulder as he did so himself. Tuli blinked in surprise and looked around the room, and the moment she saw the three well-dressed men sitting calmly at the table, she hurriedly knelt as well. Anna, Fran, leave. The high priest cleared the room, sending out the grey priest who had guided my family inside. The door shut tight, and Sylvester, the highest authority in the room, casually waved his hand. Have a seat. I permit you to speak. It is an honor, sir. Dad gave a soldier's salute before sitting at the table. Mom did the same, trudging her way to an empty seat. Tuli looked around anxiously, sensing the sparks in the air, then sat next to me. Sylvester crossed his legs and exhaled before beginning to speak. The situation has demanded that I adopt mine and have her as my daughter. Understood. Make it so that the commoner mine has died here. Tuli shot her head up and looked at me, her face pale. Is this my fault? You were attacked because I came to get you, right? No, Tuli, the culprit was inside the temple all along, so I would have been attacked even if you hadn't come to get me. I desperately explained the situation as best I could so that Tuli wouldn't blame herself. I told her how it had gotten so dangerous that I needed to attack a noble, which was a crime that would have put my family and attendants in danger too. If this is anyone's fault, it's mine for getting you all wrapped up in this. It was scary, wasn't it, Tuli? It was scary, it was, but adoption... Tuli looked at the floor, tears dripping from her eyes. I reached out and stroked her hair. Sylvester looked at Tuli, a painful grimace flashing across his face for only the briefest of moments before he quietly spoke with the harsh expression of an archduke. Mine needs to be the daughter of an archnoble so that I may adopt her. You, her family, are complicating that. I considered executing you all to tie up any loose ends, but since that would no doubt send mine into a frenzy, I decided to spare your lives. However, that does not change that you cannot meet as family ever again. Sylvester's firm declaration made everyone in my family gasp in shock. They looked at him with wide eyes, their lips trembling. The Mind Workshop will continue to exist and produce paper, books, and other products. She will also remain in possession of her chambers in the temple, so if you sign this contract, you will be able to meet her in business. That is all I can permit. Sylvester held out the magic paper being used for our magic contract. It was the one the High Priest had just finished making. Mine, read this for them. They'll trust you more than they would any of us. Most commoners couldn't read, which led to more than a few cases of people getting tricked into signing unfavorable contracts. I had heard there were even merchants who had suffered great losses after not understanding deceptive euphemisms that nobles had slid into their contracts. That was why it was important for the illiterate to have someone who they could trust available to read for them. I stood up and headed to the part of the table where the pen and ink had been lined up. Sylvester Karstedt and the High Priest were to my left, while my family was sitting to my right. I picked up the contract while looking at them all. I looked at them all, then frowned hard. It hurt so bad that I had to read out loud a contract made to separate me from my family. Mine will be announced to be dead. Henceforth, neither party may acknowledge the other as family, should they ever meet. Mine must be treated as one would treat a noble. Thus are the terms of this contract. I set the paper onto the table and saw Tuli, who was sitting the furthest away from me, start to cry again. If I sign this, does this mean you won't be my little sister anymore, Mine? We won't be sisters even if you don't sign it. The contract was mainly there to allow us to continue seeing each other. My adoption was going to happen either way. I don't want that. Me neither, but I don't want to put you in any more danger. You survived this time, but maybe you won't next time. They might even go after Mom and Camille next, all because of me. A haunted look crossed Tuli's already pale face. She must have remembered the fear she had when being kidnapped. Not much time had passed since the knife had been held to her throat. It only made sense that she would be afraid. I don't want to keep putting my family in danger. Please understand, Tuli, this is for your sake. But Tuli bit her lip and groaned, unable to agree with me. I wanted to cry too. My vision blurred and a tear rolled down my cheek. Tuli, please, write your name on it. If you don't, we'll never see each other again. Even if we stop being family, even if I can't call you my big sister, I at least want to keep seeing you. I don't want this to be goodbye forever. What? Tuli looked at me wide-eyed, then abruptly stood up and raced toward me, tears trailing behind her as she ran. I immediately clung to her. I'll do my best to make books and toys for you and Camille, okay? Come and visit me in the temple and my chambers. Just let me see you. I want to know how you're doing. Mine, don't cry. Tuli tightened her arms around me and spoke in a halting voice, pausing as she tried to choke back her tears. I'll come visit you in the temple. I'll work hard and learn to read so I can read your books, okay? I want you to come visit and then take the toys and books back home with you. Camille can't come to the temple until his baptism, so I'll need you to give him my gifts for me. I looked up at Tuli, and her warmth forced my troubled frown into a smile. Tuli wiped the snot from her nose while she responded, Definitely. I'll definitely give him your gifts. Also, you're joining Karina's workshop, right? If you work hard and become a first-rate seamstress, I'll order my clothes from you. I want you to make my clothes one day, Tuli. My request restored the light in Tuli's puffy red eyes, and she gave me a firm nod. I promise, I'll make your clothes no matter what. I love you, Tuli. I'm so proud to have an older sister like you. Well, not anymore, but... We hugged tightly once more, then Tuli signed the magic contract, sobbing all the while. It felt a little ironic that the letters she had worked so hard to learn over this winter would prove useful here. She took out her knife and cut her finger to make the bloody fingerprint. Her part done, she returned to her seat, still choking back sobs. Mine. Mom stood up from her chair, holding Camille in his sling, handing Camille in his sling to Dad. She knelt beside me as I stood next to the contract, and while on her knees, embraced me in a warm hug. Perhaps due to the smell of milk, I was enveloped by a sweet, nostalgic scent as I wrapped my arms around her, too. Mom, I couldn't think of what to say, so I kept hugging her tightly. As I stood there in silence, Mom whispered to me in a troubled tone. I cannot talk right because my nose feels like it's congested. Yeah. Okay, that feels a little bit better. It feels a little better. It's too soon for you to be leaving your parents. I'm sorry, Mom. She was holding me so closely that I could hear her heartbeat as she spoke. She stroked my hair like she usually would at night when we went to bed and started giving me her usual list of warnings. Take care of yourself, mind. You always get sick so easily. Ask the people around you for help when you need it. Listen to what they tell you so you don't keep being a thorn in their side, and don't charge off and do things on your own. Help where you can, but don't rely on others too much. And normally I would have stopped paying attention by now, but the realization that I'd never hear her lecture me like this again made my heart sink. I nodded, still clinging to her, and listened to every word, but she kept saying so much that eventually she just started repeating herself. It almost made me laugh. And finally, one last thing. There's still something else? I looked up and actually did let out a chuckle. Mom's own smile broke down and I could feel her tears dripping down onto my face. Don't push yourself too hard. Stay safe and happy. And here it comes. Okay, sorry guys. I'm worried if I start talking, or start reading it, I'm gonna break down. Dang it, I just got my freaking nose cleared out. I love you, mine. My precious mine. I love you too, Mom. Mom let me hold on to her for a little longer, then slowly let go and stood up. Mom, do you need me to write your name? Dad could sign his name thanks to work, and I had taught Tuli how to write while she was studying in the temple. I didn't think Mom knew how to write, but she slowly shook her head at my offer. I studied with Tuli over the winter. I wanted to read the letters you wrote, too. It's not much, but I can write everyone's name now. Mom gave an embarrassed smile and picked up the pen before writing her name and Camille's with a shaky hand. Once that was done, like Tuli, she stamped the contract with her blood. Dad walked over to us, holding Camille in his sling. He was probably about to hand Camille over to Mom, so as she stayed standing instead of going back to her seat. Dad, can I hold Camille? Yeah. Dad undid the sling, needing Mom's help to do so, since he could barely move his arm, then held Camille up to me. I held him properly, having finally learned how to, and his eyes opened the moment I peered at his face. Is he gonna cry again? Poor girl, freaking her baby brother cries every time he sees her. That sucks. Camille's sweet baby scent caught my nose as I rubbed my cheek against his. I inhaled deeply, then gave his cute forehead a kiss. I don't think he'll remember me, but I'll make lots of picture books for you. Be sure to read them all for me, okay? I handed Camille back to Mom before he could start crying. Yeah, 'cause he probably would have. After a moment of hesitation, she made a small cut on his finger, then stamped it against his name as he started crying in pain. Oh, poor thing. Mom left while consoling Camille, leaving me with Dad. He hugged me using just his right arm, since the burns on his left stopped him from being able to move it much. Dad, is your arm okay? It hurts, doesn't it? I'm sorry. You got hurt because of me. No, I'm your father, but I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry, mine. Dad forced out in a low voice, his face twisted with regret and tears trickling down his cheeks. As I felt his arm tighten around me, I shook my head over and over. No, Dad, you've protected me my whole life. If I ever get married, which I don't know if that will happen or not, to be honest, because we've seen how she reacts to that idea, I hope it'll be to someone strong who can protect me just like you have. Hearing that, Dad furrowed his brow and shook his head, now wearing a tearful grin. Mine, if whoever you marry can't protect you, I'll come beat him up myself. I know you'll always be there for me, Dad. I hugged him tighter, and Dad buried his face on my shoulder. Yeah, I've always wanted to hear a daughter of mine say that, but now that I have, and now that you're going to leave, it hurts more than anything else. Dang it. Sorry, guys. Dad had protected me and raised me my whole life, and I couldn't stop crying. My name's going to change, and I can't call you Dad anymore, but I'll always be your daughter. I'll protect this city and you and everyone I will. Mine. Dad squeezed me tighter, and I couldn't stop the explosion of emotions inside of me. The ring the high priest had lent me started shining as my mana poured into it. Oh boy, here comes the blessing. Dang it, got a freaking bump right above my eye on my eyebrow. It's annoying me. What? Mine? Dad stepped back in surprise, looking between my shining ring and the three nobles who had all stood up with their shining wands in hand. Mine, contain yourself. No, my mana is overflowing because of my love for my family, so I have to use it for their sake, I murmured. The ring shone brighter, and my lips started chanting a prayer almost on their own. O mighty King and Queen of the endless skies, ye mighty God of darkness and Goddess of light, O mighty eternal five who rule the mortal realm, ye mighty Goddess of water Flutrain, God of fire Ladenshaft, Goddess of wind Shitzaria, God of earth Geduld, God of life Abeglaven, I ask that ye hear my prayers and grant thy blessings. I gradually spread my arms, and a faint, fluttering yellow light gleamed from inside the ring as I spoke the names of each god. I looked at the light of my mana and continued my prayer so that my family could be blessed as much as possible once I was gone. Gone. Quote unquote. I offer thee my heart, my prayers, my gratitude, and ask for thy holy protection. Grant those I love the power to strive toward their goals, the power to deflect malice, the power to heal their pain, and the power to endure trials and tribulations. A gentle yellow light filled the room, then started to trickle down from above like shining snowflakes. The light didn't just land on my family. I could see some of it flying out of the room as if going to the other people who were precious to me. The burns are gone, Dad said, running a hand along his now unscathed left arm. That's the healing power of Flutrain. Mine, I'm proud to have a daughter like you. Use the power you've been gifted right and protect this city. I won't use them to do anything you'll get mad about, I promise. I would hope not. After bumping his fist against mine, Dad turned to the contract paper and signed it, his hand shaking as he did so. He then cut his finger using a knife and stamped it against the contract before lowering his head and gritting his teeth. I took the pen in hand and looked at my family one by one. Tuli was looking at me with bright-eyed eyes. Kamil was no longer crying. Perhaps due to my blessing having healed his cut. Possibly. I mean, he's a baby. Mom was crying quietly, hugging Kamil to her chest while she watched me, and finally... Dad was standing next to me, his head lowered and a hand covering his eyes. Dad, Mom, Tuli, Kamil, I love you all. In front of me were two contracts, one to stop me from referring to my family as family, and one to change my name from Mine to Rosemine. I clenched my teeth and signed both in quick succession, then held out my palm to Dad. Oh, so she didn't cut it herself. I thought the way that it was worded in the video I watched, where he kind of summarized the events of the light novel, it seemed like she had done it herself. I was like, wow, she's grown a lot from having other people do it for her to doing it herself. Okay, so she did. Okay. Then held up my palm to Dad. Crying but resolved, he made a slight cut of my finger for me, and I stamped the blood that puckered out onto both contracts. In an instant, they both burst into golden flames and disappeared, along with everybody's signature. The contracts were sealed. Before us stands Rosemine, the daughter of an arch noble. Sylvester said as my family jolted in surprise at the sudden flames. I looked down at the floor, then knelt. We will take our leave, then. Please take care of yourself, my lady. Farewell. Now that I was the daughter of an arch noble, we can no longer act as equals. They wouldn't understand what a bow meant. The culture here hadn't developed in the same way, but I didn't care. I bent my hips in a 90-degree angle and hung my head low, hoping to convey my respect and gratitude as much as possible. I think it might take one more video to do the rest of this, to be honest. Thank you for coming today. I pray from the bottom of my heart that we meet again one day. With that, those who I had known once known as my family left, and I, now Rosemine, could not follow them. I was alone. The epilogue! I figured it would take until next week to do this. Good God. How much have I gotten done? A little over an hour. Do I have time for the epilogue? I think I do, because I think there's at least 2, 3, 4 stories for the side stories, so that will be tomorrow's video. Or one of tomorrow's videos. Epilogue. Lutz was in the Gilberta Company. He had just escaped those with the others after Mine and Tuli were attacked by strange men on the way home, with Gunter, Daniel, and Otto managing to get them back following a tough fight. Otto, Lutz, what happened? Tell me everything you can without breaking any secrets. Benno yelled, rushing up the stairs. Someone must have told him that they had fled here. Otto debated over what to say for a second, then narrowed his eyes at Benno in a glare. Benno, keep your voice down. You'll wake Renee. Yeah, whatever. Let's ignore Otto and tell me what you can. Otto and Benno's usual back and forth helped Lutz relax just a little. He started to explain the situation, starting with Thule having come to walk home. Starting with Thule having to come walk home together. Then they met Otto searching for another Duchy's noble on the way home, and while talking to him, they were attacked. The attackers were after Mine, but given how they argued about which girl to get, they couldn't have known her very well. Daniel stopped the attackers in their tracks, and then they ran to the Gilberta Company. From there, Mine and Gunter were to the temple to tell the High Priest what had happened, while Daniel called the Knight's Order over. Oh yeah, Mine apparently called for help too, Otto murmured. All eyes fell on him. Lutz, having been racing to keep up with Gunter, hadn't noticed Mine calling for help. There was so much that Lutz didn't know, especially given that Gunter had stopped him from going to the temple, that just made him even more frustrated with himself. She stamped some blood from her knee onto a charm hanging from her neck. Apparently someone would come help her if she was in trouble. Lutz had no idea what all that was about, but Benno seemed to have an idea. This is much too soon. Damn it all, he spat, then spun around to return to the store. Master Benno, it's absolutely top secret, Benno yelled as he raced down the stairs, cursing at who knows what. He knows what's going on. He knows that something like that has happened, but he doesn't know who. Lutz bit his lips. Something was happening right now, and he had no idea what it was. Mine was in so much danger, but he couldn't do anything for her. There was a wall he couldn't climb over no matter how hard he tried. A wall keeping him from her. A wall no amount of guts and determination could overcome. Look, Benno's yelling made Renee cry. What a scary uncle he is. There. Otto picked up Renee and started gently rocking her, which was enough to bring Karina back to her senses. Her widened eyes had been fixed on Benno's intense expression. Thule also seemed to relax slightly, the stiff look on her face loosening as everyone moved toward Renee. She had been shaking and hadn't said a word since coming here, but now she murmured something about how she was supposed to have brought the toy she made with Mine. This inspired Otto to start bragging about Renee, which Thule fought back against by bragging about Camille. I'm tired of listening to you both, seriously. Lutz, unwilling to join the conversation about babies, walked up to a window and looked down at the street. He thought he might be able to see soldiers or knights moving around, but all he saw was the usual flow of people, as if the ambush had never happened at all. Mine's okay, right? Thule, we're going to the temple. Come here. After some time, Gunter came to get Thule. His left arm was covered in what looked like severe burns. Her face paled when she saw the black and red discoloration streaming down his forearm. Dad, what happened to your arm? Where's mine? She's in the temple. Come on. The cheerful smile Gunter would always have on his face when talking to his daughter was nowhere to be seen. A frown creased his forehead, and his voice came out uncharacteristically flat. Ethel was behind him, Camille in her arms. Given that she had only just recently given birth, she wasn't supposed to be moving around too much yet. If she was being called to the temple with everyone else, something had definitely happened to Mine. Hearing that, or sensing that, Lutz looked up at Gunter. Mr. Gunter, I'll explain later. Wait here. No matter how close he and Mine were, they weren't family. That was why Lutz hadn't been called at all. Well, it's her biological family, not her implied family. All he could do was wait at the Gilberta Company, unable to go to the temple by himself. I'll either be on the first floor or at Benno's place on the second floor. The first or second floor? All right. Up until now, he had been at Karina's place since Thule was scared, and he wanted to stay by her side. On his own, however, there was no need for him to be there. As a Lahurl, he belonged at Benno's place on the second floor, one floor down. I'm just going to be anxious all day if I sit around doing nothing. Might make more sense for me to go get some work done. Let's follow Gunter and the others down the stairs to the store on the first floor. As they reached the exit, Gunter suddenly turned around and glared at Otto, who was still holding Renee. Otto, you hurry on back to the gate. Tell the Commander a knight ordered me to go to the temple. Yes, sir. Let's saw Mine's family off, then went back to the store. Benno and Mark were discussing printing workshops with deadly serious expressions on their faces. There must have been some kind of secret to Mine's charm, one that would have an enormous impact on those working workshops if they had planned. If I don't hurry up and get to work, I'm going to be left behind. Benno wasn't even thinking about Lutz when he had heard about Mine's charm and rushed down the stairs. He hadn't even called him to his discussion with Mine. Or with Mark. He had no choice but to give up on going to the temple, but he wasn't about to be excluded from the printing workshops too. I'm not going to let them leave me behind. Lutz pumped himself up and started working through the Mine workshop's profit ledgers. Gil was working hard to learn math, but wasn't quite good enough to manage by himself. He still needed Lutz to look over his work. Why not just leave all that to the workshop? If they mess up and lose money, that's on them, Leon said with a grimace as he peeked over Lutz's shoulder. He was a Lahurl being trained as a waiter in the temple who had a considerable amount of experience dealing with workshops and stores. It firmly believed that Lutz was getting too involved in the Mine workshop. After all, Lutz was looking over their ledgers and doing all sorts of additional work for them. From an outsider perspective, it did seem to be a clear case of favoritism. But Let's didn't see it that way at all. The orphanage branch of the mine workshop is just a trial run for the new printing workshops that are going to be made. I gotta do a good job here. New workshops? You're doing that kind of work? Leon raised his voice in surprise, and Leon let's give a big nod. Unless I get good enough to help Master Benno establish new workshops, he won't bother to take me to different cities. Messing up with the mine workshop a little is no big deal, so he told me to use it as practice. This isn't actually favoritism at all. So they're just a stepping stone, huh? Leon wasn't wrong. Unlike the children of merchants, Let's didn't have a family store he could practice with. Mine's workshop was the only place he could use to grow while not having to worry about making mistakes. It was when he had finished the paperwork and was waiting for Benno to look it over that balls of light suddenly burst in through the window. They passed right through the glass and started to spin around the room. What the? Benno, Mark, and Let's all stared wide-eyed at the spinning balls turn into gleaming dust that rained down on them. Oddly, the light seemed to be avoiding Leon entirely. Wow, what an ass. I'm not calling mine an ass, I'm calling Leon an ass. As Let's stood in place looking up at the ceiling in a daze, the light gradually faded. Eventually it disappeared completely as if nothing had happened at all, and a stunned silence fell over the room. What the heck was that? Benno asked. I do not know, Mark replied. Let's looked over in bewilderment. Leon looked over in bewilderment. That stuff was definitely avoiding me, right? Let's look down in his palm where some of the light had landed. None of it remained, instead having seemingly melted into his body. Everyone blinked in confusion, wondering what had happened and why the dust had avoided Leon, until eventually Gunter and the others returned to the store. Sorry for the wait, Let's. They all wore dark expressions and their eyes were puffy from crying. Let's had assumed they had gone to fetch Mine from the temple, but she was nowhere to be seen. Nervous butterflies fluttered in his stomach. He kept his mouth shut, worried that if he asked where Mine was, he would never be able to go back to how things once were. Let's looked around the room trying to find something else to talk about when suddenly his eyes fell on Gunter's arm. The skin was smooth, the discolored burns from before having vanished entirely. Mr. Gunter, your burns. It was Mine's last blessing. Her light dust healed the burns. Gunter grunted through clenched teeth. Let's looked at Tuli and Effa, shocked by Gunter's choice of words. Last blessing? Let's swallowed hard, his body trembling, but before he could ask Gunter what he meant, Mark clapped his hands together. Then I suppose the light we just saw was Mine's blessing as well. The light came here too? Gunter asked, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. Let's nodded hard, explaining how balls of light had burst into the room, then turned into dust that rained down on everyone except Leon. Seems like the light went to everyone Mine cares about. Pretty strong blessing, too. It'd have to be to cure these burns, Gunter said with a sad smile. The resignation in his eyes told Let's everything. It had all ended elsewhere in a place he could never go. What happened to Mine? Why isn't she here? Mine's gone now. The nobles took her. She's gone, Tuli said, tears streaming down her face and dripping onto the floor. Benno furrowed his brow hard and narrowed his eyes. Gunter, tell me one thing. Is the mine workshop going to keep running? Master Benno, Mine's gone now. Now's not the time for that. Shut up, this is important. If she's dead, I'll have to buy the workshop and keep it going. If the nobles took her, I'll have to do something else. The sooner I act, the better. Let's couldn't understand what Benno was saying, but it seemed Gunter did. Benno, do you know? I'm not sure about the details, but Otto said she stamped that charm with her blood. I know what'll happen if Mine didn't die. Where was I at? I know what'll happen if Mine didn't die. Baron Fest will take her. So, what's the name of the new forewoman? Gunter, glaring at Benno with eyes so cold they froze Leslie's blood, opened his mouth. Rosemine, the daughter of an archnoble. She runs the workshop now. Mine is dead. That's the story. That's the story? Let's was at a loss for words, and Gunter ruffled his hair entirely like he would do to Mine. Mine became the daughter of an archnoble to protect us, to protect her family, to protect you. From the Archduke to be able to adopt her, she needs to be known as the daughter of an archnoble, and that'll save her life and ours. But in return, we were forbidden through a magic contract to ever treat her like family again. You all are in too deep with Mine. Be careful if you don't want to get executed. I appreciate the warning, Benno said sincerely before letting out a sigh and slumping his shoulders. Still, I thought we had at least 2 years to prepare for this. Life sure comes at you fast. What? Master Benno, Mine's gone? An archnoble took her and she can't see her family as family anymore? What are you saying? Let's yelled, shocked by Benno's attitude. But all he got was a cold look from him. Listen up, Let's. That weirdo didn't die. She's gonna keep on living as Rosemine. Do you think that weirdo's gonna change as a person just because she went from being a commoner to an archnoble's daughter? No. The only thing that's changed is how much more terrifying her rampages are going to be now that she has actual authority, Benno roared. Mine stomping around was scary enough already, but now that she had the authority of an archnoble, there would be nobody who could stop her. Not to mention, if she's only changed her name, then Rosemine is still going to be a partner in the Italian restaurant. The Gilberta company just finally managed to get some business from med nobles. After years of serving lay nobles, and now we're suddenly co-owning a business with an archnoble? If you've got the time to be all weepy, get to work instead. Whether her name's Mine or Rosemine, what's that weirdo gonna want? A bookworm whose obsession had survived an actual death and reincarnation wouldn't change her ways just from becoming an archnoble named Rosemine. There was only one thing she would want more than anything else. Books. That's right, she's higher in status now, and we're gonna have to make some changes. But we're still a business doing trade, and with the Archduke's approval, we're gonna be doing business with Rosemine, whether we like it or not. Benno said, and all of Mine's family shot their heads in his direction. You all might not be able to meet or talk to an archnoble, but we can talk to Rosemine as business partners. We got paperwork to exchange, and it'll be more than easy to slip some letters in amid all the papers. I predicted this would happen, and already had Let's and Mine sign a magic contract together. All else fails, we'll still be able to stay in written contact with her. They couldn't face Mine and call her their family, but nothing stopped them from writing letters to her. Benno gave a pained grin as he explained that even magic contracts had loopholes. Is that true, Let's? If I write Mine a letter, will you give it to her for me? Thule asked. Pulling Let's back to his senses, there were still things he could do for Mine. As long as she was alive, it wasn't too late. He could make books and act as a bridge between her and her family, and with that in mind, he gave a big nod. You can count on me. They left the store together and started on their way home. Mine was, for all intents and purposes, dead to the world. They would have to hold a funeral for her as soon as they got back. Mine was killed by the noble that broke into town. Tell that to your family. We've got our own preparations to take care of, Gunter said, his brow tightly furrowed as he looked up at the sky. In a way, that explanation wasn't dishonest. After all, it was because of the noble who had broken into town that Mine had become a noble herself. All right. After getting home, Let's told his parents about Mine's funeral, and they all hurried to finish their dinner. His parents were the first to rush outside, each wearing black cloth around one arm. Let's and his brother Ralph followed suit, each wrapping black cloth around one arm to signify that they were involved with the funeral. Hey, Let's, how did Mine die? She was doing better lately, wasn't she? Mr. Gunter said a noble killed her. I don't know anything else since I wasn't there. Neighbors wearing black cloth wrapped around their arms gathered by the well in the plaza. Normally the corpse would be resting on a board to be carried to the graveyard. But without a corpse, they couldn't do that for Mine. Instead, there was just a tiny box. Inside were Mine's clothes and the hair stick she usually wore. Nothing else. What's going on here? Where's the body? One of the neighbors asked. Everyone was surprised by the unusual funeral. Gunter, who was leading the funeral, grimaced and looked at the ground. There was clear pain in his eyes. Mine was attacked by a noble from another duchy. They killed her and stole her body. That's real tragic. I'm sorry for your loss. Anything that was stolen by nobles would never come back. Everyone in the neighborhood knew how deep Gunter's love for her was for his kids, and how much he doted on Mine despite her wet, sickly nature. They knew without even asking how much it hurt him to not even get her body back. And since nobles were involved, nobody asked him about anything else. Well, yeah, obviously they're not going to inquire because they don't want to hurt him even more. It's a real shame, too. She was finally getting healthy again. Yeah, she was. Well, in comparison, anyway. The neighbors looked at the wooden box and thought back to how Mine had been during her baptism and Camille's birth and began sharing stories and the like. It was said that the door for the lands of the dead opened only at dawn, when the god of darkness and the goddess of light met, and that the husband and wife gods would guide the recently deceased there when the morning sun had risen. Those who knew the deceased would share memories and talk all night until the departed had safely moved on. But Mine had barely spent any time with her neighbors, so there wasn't much for them to say. Hey, Let's, you were close with Mine, weren't you? Say something about her. Oh, God. Let's thought back over the 2.5 years he had spent with Mine. At first, she couldn't even walk to the gate. She had wanted to make books, but didn't have paper on ink, so she had tried waving grass fibers together then making clay tablets. Even when she eventually did manage to make paper, there was a lot more she needed to do before she could make a book. Mine would always collapse as soon as she decided to do something, but she always worked hard to get what she wanted. When we first started, she'd get out of breath just walking to the well, but in the end, she could walk all the way to the forest on her own. Oh yeah, that reminds me. She sure did a lot of weird things like shave wood and mess around with clay. Didn't you two boil wood in a pot, Let's? Faye and his friends who had gone to the woods with Mine started talking about what they remembered her doing there. That must have encouraged Let's' family to start talking too. All the recipes Mine thought up tasted great. Mine learned letters and math while helping Gunter at the gate, and she taught all that to Let's too. She was smart. Oh yeah, I didn't know that about that. After their baptism, Let's had become an apprentice merchant, and Mine an apprentice shrine maiden in the temple, but he didn't talk about that in public, since temple shrine maidens didn't have a very good reputation. Oh, you ain't kidding. As far as everyone here was concerned, she was just helping out at the gate and doing the paperwork that Lutz brought back from the Gilberta Company. Barely anyone knew what Mine had really been doing since her baptism. Mine had founded a workshop in an orphanage, made ink, and then finally made books, became Johann's patron, and had him make metal letter types for her, funded Heidi's research into colored ink, and after some trial and error with Ingo, finished a printing press. She was amazing. And Lutz wanted to tell everyone that, but he couldn't. He had no idea how much about booking making was safe to be talked about. Mine was weak and slow to grow, Effa began, holding Camille in her arms, so we were always scared that she might not live to see the next day. Tilly started getting more independent when she was 2 or 3, but it took Mine until she was 5. Before then, she would always cry about how unfair it was that only Tully was healthy, or how unfair it was that we all got to go outside. It seemed to hurt her as a mother that Mine hadn't been born a healthy child. That was probably the old Mine, Lutz thought. The Mine he knew would never cry about things being unfair. She worked hard to get stronger on her own terms, and while she often ran in circles, she was always dedicating her all to getting books to read. But once she did stop crying about things being unfair, she started getting mad about things. She'd say, "I hate this body," and start cleaning the house until she broke out in a fever. She'd do weird dances until she fell over and say eating certain things was good for her body before ending up getting stomach aches. Effa continued with a small smile. Now that's the Mine I know. It was easy for Lutz to remember and visualize all the weird things Mine had done. It was around when she stopped crying and getting mad about things all the time that she started going to the forest with Lutz. She never expected to be the same as normal kids, but she still got strong enough to go outside and join festivals. To think that after all that, she would be taken from us like this. Having said their piece, Mine's family shed tears and offered no more words. But everyone understood their daughter had finally gotten healthy, only to be killed by an outsider noble who had then stolen her body. It would be a quiet funeral. Under the glow of the dancing fire that lit the plaza, Gunter silently I cannot talk. Silently carved a grave marker for Mine out of wood. Tears running down his cheeks all the while. They waited up the night, taking turns to nap. When second bell rang, the wives began distributing bread and tea. It was forbidden to eat meat before the funeral was over. Second bell. Okay, now I'm confused as to how the time thing works. Does first bell start at midnight? And if so, how long is the period between that and each bell? I'd like to know, actually. After finishing their simple breakfast, they shouldered the light board and headed to the temple. They needed to report the death and then collect a medal permitting the burial. When they arrived, the temple gate's guard led them into the chapel. It was standard for gray priests to handle the deaths of citygoers, but for some reason the high priest was there this time. A 7-year-old born in the summer named Mine? Very well. After leaving them to wait in the chapel for a bit, the high priest returned with a flat white medal which he handed to Gunter. It was the medal Mine had stained to blood during her baptism. Those served as a show of government approval for the burial and as substitute gravestones for poor commoners who couldn't afford their own. With the medal in hand, they went to the graveyard outside the city. As there was only a light box on the board, the men shouldering it were able to walk quicker than they usually would. They were also quieter than usual, since none of them knew Mine very well. Okay, it's going to take one more video to finish this volume, and then we're getting into uncharted territory, everybody. And that video is going to be recorded tomorrow. They buried the box in the corner furthest from the graveyard's entrance. It didn't take long to dig the grave since the wooden box was so small. Gunter pressed the medal against the grave marker he had carved. It stuck tight to the board, which he then stabbed deep into the ground so that it would stand upright, just like those marking the surrounding graves. Graves of the rich had words carved into the marker, but since very few people could read, poor people could read, the nearby graves didn't have any words on them. People would instead identify them based on the shape of the wood or where the medal had been stuck onto it. Mine's grave, however, had the words, "Our beloved daughter." but the floor of the meadow had been stuck. With the burial finished, the funeral was complete. There would have been discussions of wills and succession had she been the head of a house, but none of that was necessary for mine since she had died so soon after her baptism. Everyone returned to their daily life the next day. Hang on, guys. Heck, with the video I was watching, the guy said that people would need tissues. He wasn't kidding. He wasn't kidding at all. Lance was back to his normal schedule, too. He left his house, raced down the stairs, past the well, and then up another flight of stairs. Before knocking on a door, Thule answered, a curious look on her face. Morning, Les, did something happen? Did something... Oh. Now that mine was Rosemine, he couldn't be walking her to the temple anymore. He would need to watch over her and stop her from wandering all over the place. Yeah, because I'm assuming she would have her own bodyguards and stuff. He wouldn't have to make sure she was staying healthy. He wouldn't be making anything with her. God damn it. He wouldn't be hugging her whenever she needed it. He wouldn't be there when she was in trouble and needed a shoulder to cry on. There was nothing for him there anymore. Mine's really gone, huh? There was a part of him that expected mine to still be there, but as Rosemine, she needed to live as the proper daughter of an Orange Noble. Mine was gone, and now that she was Rosemine, she would never again be the girl that Les had known and spent so much of his life with. Not only just 2 years, but still. For the first time, I was truly understood that mine was gone. He trembled and the tears that hadn't come out during the funeral suddenly burst forth. Thule gently stroked his head until he calmed down just like she used to do with mine. Les, you can still talk to mine through work, can't you? I can talk to her, but she's not mine anymore. That's true, but mine said all the way till the end that even if she can't talk to us like normal, she at least still wants to see us. Thule murmured, thinking back on our last conversation with mine. She couldn't call them family, but mine still wanted to see that they were doing okay. With that in mind, she would probably want to keep talking with Les, even if it's just about business. Well, Les, could you take me to the Gilberta Company today? Huh? Why, Thule? I didn't want to keep my last harvest to mine, Thule said before going to the bedroom. She came back with a tote basket mine had always carried around, inside of which was the toy she had made for Renee and mine's diptych. I promised to join Mrs. Karina's workshop because I first become a first-class seamstress and make mine's clothes for her. I want to go meet Mrs. Karina so I can make that happen. You made your own promise to mine, didn't you? Thule's question made Les remember all the things he had spoken to mine about. He had promised to make and sell books together with her. He had promised to make all of the things she thought up. Yes, now's not the time for me to be crying. He had to make enough books that mine could spend all day every day lazing around her room reading them. Les wiped his eyes and picked up his stuff and with Thule beside him, opened the heavy door leading outside. Okay, here we go. This stuff will have to wait until tomorrow. I hope you guys are excited for the unknown because I am too. And I will have to work on editing this, and I'll see you guys next time.